Today at the National Press Club, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. As the election campaign draws to a close, Mr Albanese will detail his party's major priorities, including key policies on housing, healthcare and tackling the cost of living. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and today's Westpac address. My name is Tom Connell. I'm the President of the Club, Chief Election Analyst and Anchor at Sky News. Our guest today is the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. We thank him for continuing the tradition of the Leader's Address in the final week of the campaign, of course giving up his time as well, 3 days until polling day, and getting to sleep in his own bed as well, which is an advantage. Now, I know politicians really and truly do not pay attention to opinion polls, so I thought an update might help. You were behind, you're now in front, but it's close. We know politicians do have a sense of their place in history, so come Saturday we will have either the first time a government has been turfed out after one term since 1931, or the first Labor Prime Minister to win a second term since Bob Hawke. No pressure. Please welcome the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. And I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I also want to acknowledge all my ministerial colleagues who are here today and thank them for being here to provide support, but most importantly as well, thank you for the support and for being part of our team over the last 3 years. On the Wednesday before the last election, I stood at this very podium and I said it was my ambition to lead a government that honours the values of the Australian people, that repays hard work, that nourishes aspiration and creates opportunity. A government driven by strong and clear principles, no one held back and no one left behind. Through everything the world has thrown at Australia over the last 3 years, for all the challenges our nation has faced, our government has held true to those enduring Australian values of fairness, aspiration and opportunity. We have worked each and every day to repay the trust that the Australian people placed in us, to turn promises into progress, to secure Australia's place in our region, restore our standing in the world and strengthen our economy and society here at home, to deliver on our commitments and build beyond them, strengthening Medicare, backing fair wages and good jobs and investing in education and skills, so that in a changing global economy no Australian is held back, and delivering real, practical and ongoing help with the cost of living, so that in times of global uncertainty no Australian is left behind. Taking action to help people here and now while building for the long term. It has been less than 3 years since Australians voted out the Morrison government. My colleagues and I know there is much more work to do. That is what drives us. We know the power and the value of a stable, reforming, majority Labor government, the opportunities it creates, the difference it makes to people's lives. And we know the risk and the cost of a reckless and wasteful Liberal and National government. We're still cleaning up 10 years of their mess. As I said at the time, 3 years ago, right here, it was always going to take us more than 3 years to clear away the chaos and dysfunction that the Liberals left behind. But since May 2022, through these challenging times, we have laid strong foundations. On the 3rd of May, I am asking Australians to vote Labor so we can keep building for our future, so we can manage the global uncertainty facing us in the interests of our nation, so we can put the Liberals' wasted decade behind us once and for all, and so we can seize the opportunities ahead of us and share them with all Australians. That is the optimism, the ambition and the determination at the heart of our plan for building Australia's future. A plan for every Australian in every part of our country. That's why I've been campaigning to strengthen Medicare everywhere. The biggest ever investment in bulk billing, so more GPs can bulk bill every patient every time, bringing the cost of PBS medicines down to just $25 a script, the lowest price it's been since 2004, and freezing it at just $7.70 for concession card holders for the rest of the decade, opening another 50 new Medicare urgent care clinics, adding to the network of 87 that we've already opened in regions and suburbs right around Australia. This will mean by the middle of next year, 4 out of every 5 Australians will live within just 20 minutes of a clinic. And in every clinic, every Australian will only need just this, their Medicare card. All they will need. 1.3 million Australians have already benefited from an urgent care clinic with just this. And as well, we'll add to it with a new 24/7 telehealth service. 1800 Medicare, free, trusted health advice, just a phone call away, no matter where you live. Helping more Australians see a doctor for free takes pressure off our hospitals and our health system. And of course, investing in Medicare delivers on what has been our government's #1 priority over the last 3 years, helping with the cost of living. Under Labor, every household and small business will receive another round of energy bill relief, another $150 off your power bill. And all 14 million taxpayers will get not 1 but 2 more tax cuts next year and the year after. Not as a one and done, not something that disappears next July to be replaced by a permanent hike in income tax. We will lower tax rates for every taxpayer permanently, with our top-up tax cuts delivering an average benefit of $2,500. We're cutting taxes, but we're also boosting wages, helping people earn more and keep more of what they earn. Because we know that managing the cost of living, making the family budget work, is about the money that comes in as well. Our plan is for every part of our country and for every generation. And that is why we will cut 20% of student debt, saving 3 million Australians an average of $5,500 each. And we've made the system better and fairer for the future, because we don't want to see student debt grow faster than wages ever again. Our government is building more homes, including 100,000 new homes reserved for first home buyers. And we will make it possible for people to buy their first home with just a 5% deposit, cutting years off the time it takes to save for a deposit, so that instead of watching house prices rise while your rent is paying off someone else's mortgage, you're actually paying off your own home. This reform to empower a new generation of home ownership was at the centre of our campaign launch in Perth, along with, of course, our $1,000 instant tax deduction, something that will mean nearly 6 million Australians, young people, people working from home, people who can't afford an accountant, get more of their own money back at tax time. Again, permanent reform. But so much else in our plan to make people better off over the next 3 years was presented to Australians before this election campaign even began. Our top-up tax cuts were part of the new cost of living relief that the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, delivered in his 4th budget in March. And they build on the tax cuts for every taxpayer that I announced right here at the National Press Club in January of last year. We announced our historic new investment in Medicare and bulk billing in Launceston in February. And when I spoke here at the beginning of this year, my 10th address as the Labor leader, I announced our new $10,000 incentive for construction apprenticeships, helping train more tradies so we can build more homes. And I confirmed during that address that Victoria and South Australia had signed on to our Better and Fairer Schools funding agreement. Now, before the campaign began, we also secured agreement with the New South Wales Labor government, but the Queensland LNP government as well. And that means that under Labor, for the first time ever, every student in every state and territory, in every school, will get the funding and support they need to be their best. It was in Brisbane last December that I outlined our plan to build more childcare centres in regions and suburbs where they are needed most, and to abolish the Liberals' unfair activity test and replace it with our 3-day guarantee. The next steps to universal, affordable childcare that I first spoke about here when I was giving my vision statements as the Leader of the Opposition. We made our commitment to cut student debt by 20% and make free TAFE permanent nationwide in Adelaide in November last year. And our vision for a future made in Australia, using our global advantage in clean energy to power a new generation of jobs and industries in our regions and in our suburbs, was at the centre of our budget last year. And of course, we're building on it with our critical minerals strategic reserve that I outlined in an address in Perth just last week. So our plans for Australia's future, for your future, have been public, and they've been published and available for all to see for months, in some cases for years. Our agenda is concrete, comprehensive, and importantly, it's costed. Because in times of global economic uncertainty, that is the stable and responsible approach that our people deserve and our nation needs. At a time of global uncertainty, when so much in the world is unpredictable, Australians can be sure of where Labor stands and what Labor stands for. Australians can be very confident that we will always stand up for Australia, trusting our values and backing our people to build that future. And compare that with the alternative. There is a real choice before the Australian people this Saturday. The Liberals and Nationals have spent 3 years raging about problems that their decade in office created, with not a word to say about solutions. No proposals of their own, just militant opposition to our cost of living measures and mindless negativity. The Coalition have spent 3 years trying to make life harder for Australians because they thought it would make politics easier for them, talking Australia down to try to build themselves up. The Liberals have not changed and they have not learned. It is very clear to all that they have simply not done the work that you need to do if you are to present as a credible alternative government. Now, I can tell them this. The Australian people have worked hard in the face of unprecedented challenges, the worst global inflation since the 1980s, the biggest international energy crisis since the 1970s, conflict overseas and natural disasters at home. Australians have worked hard, and today underlines the real progress that we have made together. When we came to government less than 3 years ago, inflation was over 6% and it was rising. Today it's down to 2.4%. Real wages have grown 5 quarters in a row. Interest rates have started to come down, and more jobs have been created in the last 3 years than during any term of government since Federation. Because of the resilience of the Australian people, our economy is turning the corner, and our government is investing in the jobs, in Medicare, housing and education that will take us forward together, with no one held back and no one left behind. But the Liberals want to drag us back down their dead-end road, because all their contradictions and chaos and reversals, all their scrambling to pretend they didn't hear the question or really meant the opposite of the words that they themselves have said, that cuts printed in black and white don't exist. None of that can disguise the fact that their plans are fundamentally wrong for Australia. Just look at their proposal to ban working from home. Last month, Peter Dutton said that women who couldn't be in the office 5 days a week should just job share. His words, not mine. A statement that is so out of touch with the lives of modern families and the flexibility that working from home gives parents in particular. It also fundamentally misunderstands the national productivity benefit of supporting greater opportunity for women and the essential right of women to make their own choices about their own careers. Then he turns around and blames Labor for that policy being unpopular. His own shadow minister maintains that making everyone go to the office 5 days a week is the right idea. It's just the wrong time to talk about it. And that's the sentiment that drives their approach right across the board. On defence, on climate change, on their cuts to health and education, the Liberals cannot agree with themselves, and they are not ready or willing to level with the Australian people. Their answer to every question boils down to, we'll tell you after the election. I can only assume that's why my opponent is not coming here this week, because he doesn't have faith in his plan and doesn't have faith in his team, because he doesn't want to share the facts about his agenda or what it will cost. Either that or the man who spends so much time telling everyone how tough it is, the person who put himself forward to lead the nation for the next 3 years, is unwilling to face up to the scrutiny of the National Press Club that I've done now 11 times as Labor leader. Instead, he prefers to accuse journos of being activists and labels our national broadcaster hate media. Outbursts that frankly say more about his temperament than anything else. For a leader, being here in the last week of the election campaign is more than a matter of respect for tradition. Standing here is about taking responsibility for your plans. Being here is about being accountable to the people, to the democratic process. And given that Peter Dutton is going to this election with a $600 billion nuclear reactor scheme that no state or territory government from either side of politics supports, that no commercial investor is willing to back, and that the private sector doesn't want to touch with a barge pole, he should have the guts to front up and explain where the money will come from to pay for it, before Australians cast their vote, not after. He should come clean on what he will cut to pay for his nuclear reactors, what it will mean for the communities he refuses to visit, let alone consult, how he can justify the sunniest continent on Earth moving away from solar power and the driest continent on Earth investing in the form of energy which uses the most water, and what the consequences will be for jobs and industries and agriculture and manufacturing right around Australia if we turn our backs on the opportunities of renewable energy technology that over 4 million Australian households have embraced through rooftop solar energy that's tailor-made for Australia's sunlight and space, and instead push pause for 2 decades to risk it all on building the most expensive form of new energy from scratch, that their own figures say will result in an economy that is 40% smaller. Australians deserve an answer to those questions before they vote. And what's more, if your other big idea is to sack 41,000 Australians, then you owe it to Australians to explain what the consequences of those cuts will be for the services and support and pensions that people rely on, for the disaster recovery payments that communities need to rebuild, for the entitlements that our veterans earn in their service to our nation, for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and everything it means to people. It beggars belief that someone seeking to be Prime Minister of Australia could propose such a risky and extreme set of policies, and yet, after 3 years, an unprecedented 4 debates and 5 weeks of campaigning, still refuse to explain what those policies will mean to you. My message to Australians is this. If Peter Dutton wants you to take a risk on him, then he should look you in the eye. He should tell you what he will cut and what you will pay. In Australia, we sometimes think of ourselves as a young nation. But not only do we have the privilege of being home to the world's oldest continuous culture, Australia is also one of the world's oldest and strongest democracies. Every election affirms the right and the responsibility of every citizen to choose the future that they want for our nation. And at this election, the choice for Australians is more important and more clear than ever before. Because the choice that you make on the 3rd of May is not between two competing plans that strive for the same goal. It's not two sides of the same coin. This election is a choice between two fundamentally different visions for the direction that Australia should go. In the total absence of anything constructive to help in the present or anything positive to say about the future, the Liberals are urging Australians to go back to the past, back to a darker and nastier and more extreme version of the cuts and conflict and culture wars that people rejected less than 3 years ago. The government I lead is determined to take Australia forward. I've always been optimistic about Australia's future, and never more so than now, because of the challenges we have worked together to overcome, because of the opportunities we can work together to seize, and because the very best reason to be optimistic about Australia's future remains our people. And the best investment we can make in Australia's future is in our people, in you. Your courage, your resilience, your capacity, your talents and aspiration. That's a truth Labor governments have always understood. It is at the heart of every great and enduring Labor reform. And it is why, in uncertain times, every Australian can be certain of this. A vote for Labor means the certainty of Medicare, the security of being able to see a GP when and where you need it without worrying about whether you can afford it. A vote for Labor means you can be certain that childcare and early education will be more affordable for your family. You can be certain that your child and their school will get the full and fair funding they need to be their very best, public and private. You can be certain that the opportunity of free TAFE is here to stay. You can be certain that your student debt will be cut by 20%. A vote for Labor means you can be certain of a government that has your back at work, that stands for good jobs, real wage rises, the flexibility to work from home and your right to disconnect at the end of the day. A vote for Labor means you can be certain of a government building more homes and providing more help for you to buy your first home. And in an uncertain world, a vote for Labor means you can be certain of a government that will stand up for Australia, not copy from overseas. A government that will build our national security and our economic sovereignty by investing in our capabilities and our relationships in our national interest, by strengthening our Defence Force, taking action on climate change, engaging with the transformative opportunities of our region, and making more things right here in Australia. My fellow Australians, serving as your Prime Minister is the greatest honour of my life, because every day is a chance to make a positive difference to your lives. It offers the extraordinary opportunity to make this, the best nation on earth, even better. And if my colleagues and I earn your support on the 3rd of May, we will dedicate every single day of the next 3 years to proving ourselves worthy of it, securing the progress that we have made together, delivering the rewards that your hard work has won, creating the opportunities you and your children deserve, building an economy that is as resilient and innovative as our people, building a society that is as generous and fair as Australians are themselves, building a future where we draw on the talents and invest in the aspirations of all of our citizens, building a nation where no one is held back and no one is left behind, building Australia's future together. I thank you.
Prime Minister, thank you. You mentioned it there, and a big part of your campaign obviously has been the bulk billing incentives, which you say your modelling says that it will get bulk billing rates to 90% by 2030. The AMA and the RACGP are saying they don't see that sort of uplift. So that voters can actually test this claim of yours in the modelling, what does your modelling say bulk billing rates will get to by 2028?
The AMA haven't always been great fans of the whole concept of Medicare. That's the truth. So we're not shocked that occasionally not every doctor comes on board there. But the reason why we are so confident is because this isn't some academic exercise. We, in last year's budget, tripled the bulk billing incentive for concession card holders, and what that has done is lift bulk billing rates up to well above 90%. Doctors under our scheme will go from getting, if they're in a fully bulk billed clinic, will go from earning around about $280,000 to above $400,000. The modelling that we've done shows that it will be in their interests to have fully bulk billed service, and throughout the country. I've got to say, I've spoken to doctors from Bridgewater in Tasmania, to regional Queensland, Perth, Adelaide, who've said exactly that is their intention, is that this change will make that difference.
Your modelling must have a 2028 figure though, the percent improvement?
Well, what we've got is a 2030 target of achieving that, and it will go up between now, 2025. We'll, of course, this is a measure that was in our budget, that was funded, and that's our objective by 2030.
Okay. First question from the floor, Michelle Grattan from The Conversation.
Prime Minister, given the increasing demand for government services and the softening of some aspects of the revenue base, will whoever is in government over the next 10 years have to take some action to increase the taxation base?
Michelle, we're taking our plans that we intend to implement to this election. What it will do, and it is a big distinction, we'll have not one but two income tax cuts, taking that bottom first rate, the $18,200 to $45,000 rate, from 16 down to 15 and then down to 14. We think one of the things that will do, and the modelling when we changed the former government's, the Morrison government's legislated tax cuts to make them Labor tax cuts, which by definition were fairer and delivered for everybody. Part of the modelling there showed that it increased workforce participation, that it would actually have a benefit for the economy as well. We know that the coalition is saying that they'll jack up income taxes, and they'll undo that and legislate for higher income taxes at the election.
Thank you.
Next question, David Crowe from the SMH and the Age.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Prime Minister, for your speech. In your remarks, you emphasised the concrete agenda, but I think for a lot of voters there's still some vagueness about vision, and I want to go to something specific in your policy agenda on that, and that's the critical minerals reserve that you've announced only last week. It seems probably a bit niche. It's a business initiative more than anything, although it's related to trade, but it is $1 billion in taxpayer funds. And in the last couple of days, one of the biggest producers of critical minerals in Australia has just totally slammed the idea. And I want to read the quotes from Amanda Lacaze, who's the Chief Executive of Lynas. I have to say that I'm at a loss to understand the policy. It's not going to suddenly make uneconomic projects economic. There's only $1.2 billion in this fund. Even if you put half of that towards rare earths, well, that doesn't even cover Lynas's full-year production. So I'm wondering, did you not consult the industry here on how this policy is going to work? How can somebody who's a chief executive respond like that to this big idea? Does it suggest the vision is, in fact, a little bit too vague?
No, it doesn't suggest that at all. It suggests that if you have a policy aimed at any particular industry right across the board, you'll always be able to find someone who puts their hand up and says, yeah, I'd like some more government support without any obligations whatsoever. That's the way it works, let me tell you. And one of the things that government has to do is to support industry to grow, but at the same time look after the national interest. It is in the national interest for us to have a strategic reserve. That is something that I indicated very clearly as part of the plan that we had in response to the Trump administration's tariffs. It makes sense. Right around the world, what is happening is that people are understanding and governments are implementing policies, they're different ones, but the lesson of the pandemic is we need more economic resilience here. Our critical minerals reserve is a part of that.
Next question, Laura Tingle from the ABC.
Thanks for observing the tradition, Prime Minister, of being here today. You mentioned a lot of times in your speech today the backdrop of global uncertainty, and while the US President has featured in our campaign, there hasn't actually been a discussion about exactly where that leads us. So I suppose what I would like to hear from you is, do you believe that given these new uncertain elements in the global outlook, we need to tweak our defence posture towards one that's more focused on the defence of Australia, aside from what we're doing with AUKUS? And does it also mean, given that you've responded to the US position on tariffs by reaffirming our view of free trade, that we should perhaps be joining a regional free trade bloc?
Well, we have very strong trade relationships in our region, and we've built on them as well through the work that we've done with ASEAN, hosting every ASEAN leader in March last year in Melbourne. What was important about that was the fact that every leader came. There were no deputies, there were no vice presidents. Every leader of those important nations came to Australia. I've hosted Prime Minister Modi here. I've hosted the Premier of China here as well, our most important trading partner. We have built up really significant economic relationships, and what will be the third largest economy in the world as well. We've improved our economic partnership with India. I think there's a great deal in which that can grow. The US tariffs need to be put into perspective. Our exports to the United States are under 5% of our total exports. And just to give one example, in the meat sector, what's happened because of the disruption between the US and China is Australian producers opening up greater opportunities of exporting even more to China. So out of some of these trade disruptions, what will emerge, I think, is, yes, some challenges, but also some opportunities for us. And that is what I'm optimistic about, and that is what I mean by serving our national interests. On defence policy, let me tell you, the Defence Strategic Review was about defending Australia. That was what it was about, and that's why things such as the production of missiles will happen. Manufacturing will happen here this year. So not just purchasing, not just procurement from somewhere else, but how do we become more resilient as a nation in terms of our defence policy? And that's why our $57 billion increase in defence investment is so important. But it's very much targeted to what are Australia's national needs as a result of our strategic review.
That review was done before Donald Trump came back into power, though, and he's upended a lot of things. Does it need a refresh?
You don't need a refresh to tell any Labor Prime Minister, the party of John Curtin, that we need to defend ourselves. I think it was a Labor Prime Minister who understood that the kowtowing to the UK, as it was then, wasn't going to defend Australia. And I'm very proud to be part of the same party that defended Australia. Importantly, turned to Curtin not with an election, because the existing UAP government, Conservative government, toppled out of office because people thought they needed the national interest defended, and it was Labor who did it then, and it's Labor that'll do it now.
Phil Curry from the Australian Financial Review.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, PM. I just want to come back to Michelle's point about sort of lack of commitment towards spending restraint or revenue raising to get the budget back out of the red. I know you've sort of ruled out a lot of things, but it's a pretty red-hot secret or unknown secret around Canberra that Treasury wants to go after trusts. It's something Labor looked at back in 2019, and there is support in your ranks, or has been in the past. Is it something that you would look at after the election in terms of the tax treatment of trusts?
What we're looking at is what we're putting forward at this election campaign. We want Australians to get lower income taxes. That's what we're looking at. And we have a comprehensive plan that we're putting to the Australian people.
What about making money?
Well, what we have done also, I mean, you're speaking to, there's a Finance Minister and Treasurer just here who 2 days ago put out our fully costed plan. Where is the coalition? We are now, just 3 sleeps away from the election date. But importantly as well, many millions of Australians, 1 in 4, have probably voted already, either through postals or in pre-poll, and people have no idea about what their cuts are. And Peter Dutton, in the debates that have been held, has actually said, and quoted John Howard as an example, that you can't actually come forward. It was in the Channel 9 debate where you were part of the panel. You chose wisely. That at that time he said, "Oh well, you can't do anything because you don't know the state of the books." I mean, if I had have stood here at the last election and just said, "Oh, we won't tell you what cuts we'll make. We won't tell you how things add up. Just trust us. We'll tell you after the election," I would have had an interesting and appropriate response, I reckon, and Peter Dutton deserves the same.
You did have changes to super, taxes on super. Is the caveat that anything you work on takes effect after the next election and then it's not breaking a promise?
No. What we're doing is putting forward our policies. They're out there, the costings we've put out there, and I await at some time, maybe next week, the coalition to put out theirs.
Sarah Ison from The Australian.
Sarah Ison from The Oz. Thank you, Tom and PM. I just wanted to ask, actually, on superannuation and on your planned superannuation reforms. One of the most contentious parts of it is this method of raising revenue through taxing unrealised capital gains. There's opposition to that from the crossbench and other members of society. Now, would you be willing to pursue a compromise version of this and replace the unrealised capital gains method with a higher base tax rate for balances worth $3 million or more?
Oh, we have our policy. We've had legislation. It's been before the Parliament, and that's our policy. It'll affect, importantly, 0.5% of the superannuation population, 0.5. That's all, and it won't mean they don't get concessions. It'll just mean the concession isn't at large. isn't as large. That's our policy.
You're ruling out any changes?
No, what I'm not doing is changing policy at the National Press Club. You know, we have our we have our legislation. We have our legislation. That's before people, and I've been transparent. And on the income tax changes, I had the guts to come here and say, this is what we are doing, this is why we are doing it. And you will recall, at the time, the coalition said, first they said they'd oppose it and wind it back before they even saw what it was. Then they called for an election to be held last year to stop people getting an income tax cut, and then they voted for it.
Thank you.
Next question, Mark Riley from the 7 Network.
Thank you, Morris. Prime Minister, your opponent's central proposition is that people are worse off now than they were before the last election. He asks daily that voters consider, are you better off now than you were 3 years ago? Are Australians better off now than they were before you were elected?
I'll tell you what the right answer to that is, and that is that Australians would be $7,200 worse off if Peter Dutton had got his way.
A good debating tactic to turn the question around, but it's not the question.
And got his way. That is what Peter Dutton has done. You can't say there's an issue with cost of living and then vote against every cost of living relief measure. That is what Peter Dutton has done. And just as people vote either this week or on Saturday, what they'll consider is who has the best offer for them in 3 years' time. A coherent, cohesive set of policies that we want to implement, cutting student debt, cutting people's taxes, making a difference for first home buyers, making a difference for energy bill relief, cheaper childcare, the cheaper medicines that we've put in place, or Peter Dutton's plan that has not a single offer of anything that lasts more than 12 months going forward, and then jacking up everyone's taxes, and that's before you get to the $600 billion that he needs to pay for his nuclear reactors.
So no, but it could be worse. Is that the answer?
The answer is that they would have been $7,200 worse off if Peter Dutton had got his way, and Australians understand that.
Thank you.
Next question, Andrew Clennell from Sky News.
Prime Minister, thanks for being here. In the 1983 election campaign, Malcolm Fraser gave an address here where he said to journalists that they were spouting, quote, and I'm quoting him, bullshit from the press gallery. In that spirit, I'd like to put that comment in reverse. It could be said there's been a fair amount of BS in this campaign and also before the last election.
You know, we're in, like it's the middle of the day, so kids are watching.
It was when Malcolm Fraser addressed the press club too. Before the last election, you said power bills would reduce, they didn't. You said you wouldn't alter the tax cuts, you did. You said you wouldn't change super, you're trying. You said we'd have cheaper mortgages, we don't. You said on election night you'd commit to the Uluru Statement in full, you haven't. And you said when you messed up you would admit fault. Now you say Peter Dutton is seeking to Americanise the health system. He's promising to match your bulk billing funding. Some of your ads basically say he's going to abolish Medicare. You say his nuclear plan will be funded by cuts. Your renewable subsidies and rewiring the nation aren't paid for by cuts.
You might want to come up here, Andrew. And
my question is, why do you have to exaggerate in this campaign? Why can't you win this election by telling the truth?
We are absolutely telling Australians, as Peter Dutton did on Sunday night in the Channel 7 debate, to give them a free ad to match Channel 9's ad, that when asked about Medicare, he said the reason why he tried to abolish bulk billing and introduce a GP tax every time people visited the doctor was he wanted it to be sustainable. He belled the cat. That's still his view. In saying that just days ago, he was saying that Medicare is not sustainable. Susan Ley has stood up in the Parliament, spoke about the Liberal Party thinks people don't value things which are free. Medicare's free, free TAFE, a whole lot of things are free that are important that Australians value.
So you know, and when abolish Medicare,
and when he tried to abolish bulk billing, he tried, and then he tried also to introduce a tax, a payment every time people visited a hospital. He tried to increase the cost of pharmaceuticals by $5. When he couldn't get his way, he froze the Medicare rebate for 6 years. He ripped $50 billion out of hospitals. This is a matter of record. And Peter Dutton said that if you want to look at future performance, look at past performance. Look at past performance. What I did on income taxes was to come here, front up, say I have changed our position. Why? Because there's a cost of living pressures are on people, and it wasn't sustainable to, on the 1st of July last year, to say that you and I get $9,000 and the people who've served this meal, the people who've cooked it out the back, the people who'll clean up after us in this room when we leave, get a big duck egg. That is not the Labor way. I fronted up. I had the argument, I won the argument, and they voted for it.
Applause, I'm sure, for the answer and the question. Next question comes from Chloe Burris from the 10 Network.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You said that an Indigenous voice to Parliament is gone. Your Minister, Penny Wong, seemed to suggest it may not be gone forever. So which is it? Where to from here on recognition and reconciliation? And do you agree with the comparison to marriage equality?
Well, that's not what the Foreign Minister said at all, and she's right here, so probably not a great idea to verbal Penny Wong while she's sitting there. I'll just give you that.
Do you agree?
I'll just give you that tip for free. Ask any of the cabinet colleagues; they'll explain to you why that's a bad idea. Can I make this point? We supported a voice to Parliament. I did it out of conviction, not out of convenience. It's not easy to win a referendum in this country. No Prime Minister has had a referendum in this country this century. The voice to Parliament didn't come from me, came from First Nations people who had a constitutional convention at Uluru under the former government, under a process that they set up that led to that in 2017. We put it to the Australian people, which was the gracious request. I think that was something I said I would do, and we did. We also said we would respect the outcome, and we have. What we are now working towards is practical reconciliation. How do we close the gap? The truth is that every government, Labor and Conservative, has not done well enough, because if we had, we wouldn't have the life expectancy gap, the education gap, the housing gap, the health gap. We wouldn't have First Nations people having diseases that no one in this room will have to worry about in remote communities. What we are doing is addressing those issues, still engaging through the coalition of peaks and through First Nations people, but we also respect democratic processes. I said that that was the case, and that is precisely what we have done.
Next question, Andrew Probran from the 9 Network.
G'day, PM. As you're aware, the coalition is planning a whole lot of cuts. One of the things that it proposed was slashing the EV tax break. Now, this is something that was designed by Treasury. It was meant to cost $55 million a year. It's costing more than $500 million a year. That's a shocking blowout. And a lot of these very well-fed, lovely people in this room would probably be getting that tax break. So what justification is there for such a generous tax lurk to go to the well-heeled? And will you pledge now to at least look at revising it?
One of the reasons why it costs more is that it's been very successful, is that more people are participating in it. And it was designed to support lowering our emissions by addressing a change which is occurring. We're having... I was Transport Minister a long time ago, and I remember going to a conference in Tokyo of all the big manufacturers and transport ministers around the world. At that time, 2008, I think it was, might have been 2009, the manufacturers, whether it be Japanese, American, European, all were saying there wasn't any research being done into an internal combustion engine vehicle. And what we've seen is Australia moved beyond the sort of nonsense that the coalition did of having saying that you can't have a ute, you can't tow your boat, you can't all that nonsense. We do have a shift in technology when it comes to transport around the world. We were one of two nations, the other one being Russia, that didn't have any fuel standards. We're the only ones, and it meant we were only getting the really expensive vehicles. What's happening now is that Australians are getting access to cheaper vehicles. That's a good thing.
Yes, but if your Medicare increase was not costing $8.5 billion but $85 billion, you would revise it, wouldn't you?
Well, we have costed policies, and we are...
Clearly not very well when it comes to this one.
No, well, what's happened, and what often does happen with technology, is that Australians are great uptakers of new technology. It's actually one of the things that will lead us to success, is the fact that my government makes no apologies for being involved in things like the quantum issue and a whole lot of other issues. We need to shape it as we go forward. This is one of the ways that we have done that, and it is in place.
Okay. Tax discussions become sort of piecemeal. You get asked, rule this in, rule that out. Is it time for another tax review, like the Henry tax review?
What are we doing here?
Just a cheeky one on the side.
Yeah. Look, we have our own policy process, and that's what we've done. We've handed down 4 budgets in a 3-year term. I reckon that's 4 reviews if you've sat around the ERC for as long as many of the people in this room have.
I haven't been invited yet. Claire Armstrong is next from News Corp.
Don't hold your breath.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Prime Minister, for your time today. You've been asked a few times this term, I think once here actually, if you have any regrets of the term, and you tend to say that generally nobody's perfect. I'm going to try and get a specific answer out of you. And is there something specific that you regret from the last 3 years? What is it, and what might you be able to do to rectify that if granted a second term?
Well, refer to previous answers, but also what I say is that, I don't pretend to be perfect. I work hard each and every day, and my motivation is really simple and clear, which is what is in the national interest. How do we strengthen our country? What's important is that as Prime Minister, you make decisions, like every day you make decisions. And what's important is that you continue to learn every day and continue to grow every day as well as a person. That's what my mentor, Tom Uren, taught me, to learn each and every day and to try and grow as a person every day. And that's my approach towards leadership. The other approach that I have towards leadership that I'm really proud of is that Cabinet government is back. We actually have proper processes. The former government didn't have co-ord comments for a whole lot of submissions. I assure you we don't have an overhead projector with PowerPoint presentations. We actually sit around, we have proper processes, and I trust my ministers to do their jobs as well and to bring things forward to us. And I think the capacity of the team is one of the big differences in this campaign as well. You've got senior people, but also you've got a backbencher and an assistant minister here as well, and people who have a capacity out there don't have to be hidden. The other mob have shadow cabinet ministers who haven't been cited. They've got people who aren't allowed to leave their electorate, let alone talk to anyone. I'm really proud of my leadership style. I think my leadership style is one that has brought us unity. Not unity by doing nothing, unity by doing something.
So
and
no
I
regrets,
think that is
then?
the difference
as
as
well.
well.
Answer? No regrets?
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that what's important is that you learn. You learn each and every day, and that is what I do.
Next question comes from Ben Westcott from Bloomberg.
Thanks for your speech, PM. If the polls are right, next year you'll have been in Parliament for 30 years. That 30-year stretch will almost perfectly bookend Australia's golden era when we had huge amounts of prosperity. Now, we could debate at length who's responsible for that, whether it's Hawke or Keating or John Howard. I'm sure that's a wonderful debate. But
you can ask me that if you like.
That will not be my question.
Paul might be watching, so...
all the more reason not to have the debate.
You're in trouble now.
I'll check my inbox. Anyway, in any case, economists say that golden era is coming to an end without substantial structural changes to the Australian economy. They talk about a creaking tax system. They talk about productivity falling and spending rising. They talk about no longer being able to rely on our mineral wealth going forward. So to that extent, what tough decisions are you prepared to take in the next term of government, if you win, to ensure that the golden era doesn't end with you?
Well, this economist here has noticed that many economists say you can't get inflation down without a huge spike in unemployment and leaving people behind. You can't get inflation down without smashing real wages. That's what a whole lot of economists would say. They've been proven wrong. Our government will not leave people behind. Our government has had economic reform and has worked really hard to get that inflation figure down, all forms of it now, into the Reserve Bank band. You know, we've worked really hard without, not just without seeing a spike in unemployment, but seeing unemployment lower on average than any government in 50 years and seeing real wages increasing. That to me is something that is in accordance with the principles that I want our government to hold. When it comes to economic reform and transformation, the biggest transformation perhaps that's happening since the Industrial Revolution is going on now. It is the transformation to a clean energy, net zero economy by 2050. That is a huge transformation in the way that things are made. The support for green steel, green aluminium will be absolutely critical as part of that process. Renewables backed by gas, backed by hydro, backed by batteries is part of that process as well. Distributional energy transformation is important. The use of new technology with AI and robotics and all of this is happening. Our job is to shape it in the interests of people, because otherwise it'll shape us. And that is one of the fears that I have behind my opponent's agenda, is it's almost like you can press, as I said in my speech, you can press the pause button and wait for this nuclear fantasy in the 2040s, and it's all okay. 24 out of 28 coal-fired power stations announced their closure during the former government. They had 23 different energy policies and didn't land one. And guess what? You know, if he visited one of the nuclear sites, he could visit the one in Queensland and see the coal-fired power station that's shut because of the end of their life. It's just not possible to extend them forever. And that's why we need to use what is a global economic transformation that's occurring, where there's no country that's better positioned because of the resources we have in the sky and under the ground than Australia, and backed up by our people. Like, if we're smart, this can be truly the golden era not just being extended, but because we are also in the fastest growing region of the world in human history, being incredibly prosperous. But it's not sort of just stand still, because if you just stand still, the world will go past you. And the truth is that the coalition with some of the positions that they take, which is almost like wanting the world to stay still over transformation of our transport in so many areas, is simply, they're not up to the task. And what we're asking Australians for is to continue on that path of moving forward.
Thanks. Next question, Anna Henderson from SBS.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Prime Minister, for your address. We've spoken to a lot of workers during the election campaign, and you've taken us to meet some, and so has the opposition leader, and they haven't been afraid to give us their views. They say they're spending hours in traffic every day. They're working 2 full-time jobs, saddled with a lifetime of mortgage debt, and barely any time to spend with their families. So is this Labor's vision of the Australian dream? What's your message to those workers?
That our policies have made a difference to workers. Real wages are rising. We've put in place a measure that values workers, that values them through measures such as same job, same pay, that has introduced measures aimed at increasing the pay, particularly of feminised industries in childcare and aged care. We inherited an aged care system that was in crisis, that was summed up with one word in the Royal Commission interim report: neglect. We're addressing that as a precondition of that. Women's workforce participation is at record highs. The gender pay gap we have made improvements to as well. Paid parental leave, including...
Do you get their frustrations as well? I appreciate what
It's been, of course, a very difficult time in the global economy. People have been under pressure. That is why we have taken action. Identifying the problem, as you have, is important. What's important as a decision maker is what are you going to do about it? How do you make people's lives better? You make people's lives better by giving them a cut in their income taxes, by putting downward pressure on inflation so that interest rates start to come down on their mortgages, which has happened, by making sure that you intervene to give an increase in real wages. I mean, during the last campaign, I stood here with my $1 coin where the world was going to end if people on minimum wages got a $1 a week increase. Well, we've given 3 increases. We're putting a submission for a real wage increase as well, because we understand the pressure that workers are under. I've met a woman at the Miners' Union conference in Brisbane, their national conference, who's getting $34,000 extra under the same job, same pay principles because she's working in a job side by side, was under labour hire. We've stopped that manipulation, which is there. Now, some of those decisions haven't been welcomed by every business in Australia, but we've understood that we don't want to go down the American road of people having to rely on tips to get by. We want fairness in the workplace. A Labor government will always stand up for fairness in the workplace, not undermining wages and conditions, or in the most extreme example, of course, sacking public servants so you can hire more consultants at higher rates, which seems to be their vision.
Thank you.
Next question, Nicholas Smith from The Nightly.
Prime Minister, Joe Exotic from the hit series Tiger King is, on a more serious note, he's serving a prison sentence for murder and has been convicted of animal abuse. He's also just endorsed you on Instagram. How do you feel about that? Have you ever met him, and has anyone in Labour paid for his endorsement?
Good to see some levity. I have a very passionate support for one particular animal, Toto, and I'm looking forward to voting with her on Saturday.
Thank you.
No payment to the Tiger King?
He's in jail, isn't that the question? I wasn't even aware of all of that, but, you know, I'll let that go through. I think the point of that question was to ask the question rather than to get a serious answer, I hope.
Next question, Dan Jevispati from The Guardian.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, PM. Not really sure how to follow that one up.
It wasn't a criticism, by the way. It's good to have a bit of levity. Yeah. Good on you.
Back to serious matters. So throughout the course of the campaign, you've refused to countenance the possibility of minority government. You said you're aiming for majority government.
That's the plan.
You've also spoken throughout the campaign about the importance of stability and certainty in what are really uncertain global times. In that context, in the event of a hung parliament, would it not be preferable to negotiate deals rather than govern in a legislation by legislation basis?
No.
You don't want to elaborate at all on that?
Well, I've elaborated every time, as I did before the 2022 election. I was asked the same thing. I mean, I do find it quite ironic that a group called the Coalition are speaking about majority government. They, by definition, are a coalition. We've got 78 seats. We're aiming to hold every single one of them, and we're out there campaigning hard in coalition-held seats and in Greens Party-held seats as well. It's as simple as that. Will there be the sort of agreements that we saw previously? No. And we will. You know, we've got 25 out of 76 senators. Now, we do have particularly good leadership in the Senate, 3 of which are here, of our ministers. We've got through most of our agenda. A whole lot of it has been blocked by the no-alition of the Greens, Liberals and Nats. And, you know, maybe the question can be directed to them. I do note that Adam Bandt said that Tony Abbott was on the phone to him at that time, asking for support during that period. But, you know, we are campaigning each and every day to secure a majority government. I think that is in Australia's interest, and I ask people, anyone in Griffith and Brisbane and Fowler and these places where I've been in the last week, vote Labor. If you want certainty, if you want to make sure that you don't get Peter Dutton as Prime Minister, vote Labor. That's how you ensure that happens.
A deal is different to supply and confidence governing though, right? You're not ruling out governing a minority just with supply and confidence?
Oh, we're campaigning for a majority government.
That, but a deal is different to supply and confidence. Is that fair to say?
I can be asked 50 different ways. You'll get the same answer, which is I'm campaigning for majority government. We're the only political party that can form majority government. We're the only political party that's trying to form majority government. We're not a coalition. We're a proud organisation that have been around for since 1891. My principles have always been very clear about these issues. It was what we did when I became Deputy Prime Minister in 2013 as well.
Final question comes from Peter Hobson from Reuters.
Hi, PM. I have another question about the possibility of a hung parliament, which is that several independent MPs have called for a review of the AUKUS agreement. And would AUKUS, and indeed foreign policy in general, be up for discussion with minor parties and independent MPs in any negotiations that might have to happen to achieve a minority government?
No.
All right.